Personal planning, driving and dementia. Driving requires complex coordination between your eyes, brain, and muscles. Dementia impairs many functions that are needed to drive safely, including reaction time, peripheral vision, depth perception, night vision, and problem-solving abilities. We know that because of the degenerative brain damage related to dementia, unsafe driving is inevitable. And medication side effects can make things worse. Older drivers with dementia are at greater risk for accidents compared to drivers without dementia. A driver with dementia is, overall, 2.5 times more likely to be involved in a motor vehicle collision than a driver of comparable age without a diagnosis of dementia. Drivers with dementia also have a 50% risk of a serious crash within 2 years of diagnosis. The decision to stop driving is not a matter of if, but when. The difficulty with driving cessation is that the person living with dementia may often not realize that their driving has deteriorated. This puts increased pressure on caregivers to monitor their driving and ensure that a plan for driving cessation or retiring from driving is in place. So discuss this plan to stop driving as early as possible and explore alternatives to driving. So what are some of the challenges of no longer driving? Dementia is a journey of losses, and driving can be one of the most difficult losses for a person living with dementia to cope with. Driving can be a huge part of a person's identity, and having to give this up can be devastating. Retiring from driving creates the need for planning alternative ways of getting around, which can be difficult for some people to get used to, as they may now have to fit into other people's schedules. This is particularly challenging if the person living with dementia is the only driver in the household or is the primary driver. As a caregiver, you may also find yourself struggling with this decision and with the inconvenience related to it. Driving cessation can also mean significant changes in lifestyle, and for the person with dementia, an increased dependence on others and a painful reminder that the disease is progressing. Many report the loss of driving as being worse than death. It's strongly advised to have the discussion about when the person is going to need to stop driving as early as possible, and be sensitive to the loss the person is experiencing. Try to agree on a plan or a strategy for driving cessation in advance. A plan alleviates the stress of making the decision later, even if someone is unable to recall the plan. You may want to frame the conversation as the person retiring from driving. Find out what alternative transportation is available. Public transportation, rides provided by community organization, lifts from family members and friends, things like taxi savers. Make and agree upon a checklist of changes that will be an indication that it's time to stop. Refer to BCAA's Driving Warning Signs Checklist as an example. There will be a link below this video. If people you know are hesitant about the person's driving retirement, think about whether you would let the person living with dementia drive on their own with your grandchildren in the car. You might say, well, I'm always in the car with them. But if you would go out on your own with your grandchildren in the car, sometimes it's that helps to clarify concerns of safety and bring to light the gravity of your concerns. Connect with your local resource center to learn more about what transportation services are available in your community. Keep in mind that the person living with dementia will likely forget that they've given up their license or have had it revoked. You may need to have the conversation multiple times. The one thing that unites all human beings, regardless of age, gender, religion, economic status, or ethnic background, is that, deep inside, we all believe we are above average drivers, says Dave Barry, a Canadian comedian. Many of us want to believe that our driving abilities are better than they may be. This does not always make it true. For a person living with dementia, this may mean that we need to be creative in our approach about retirement from driving. Recognize feelings of loss for both of you, both for the person living with dementia and for the caregiver, especially if both of you rely on the person living with dementia to be the main driver, or if the person living with dementia relies heavily on their vehicle. Focus on safety. Be honest about your concerns for the person's safety and that of others if something were to happen. If possible, try to get the person to voluntarily give up your license, or try to voluntarily, if you are the person who needs to retire from driving. It's always better to voluntarily give up your license. It protects your dignity and can make everyone feel more comfortable with the decision. If you are trying to encourage someone to give up their license, use questions in the conversation to try and guide the person to their own conclusion about driving. Consider if the conversation will be more successful if it were coming from the person's physician or another family member. Those who tend to respond well to authority may be more receptive if the concerns about their driving came from their physician. Ask the physician to write "do not drive" on a prescription pad if you think that this is something the person you're supporting would respond to. And try to come up with a plan together for retiring from driving. Explore driving alternatives as a new activity. For example, take the bus route together. Present alternatives as a way for the person to stay independent. And be prepared to have the conversation multiple times and share your concerns. Here's a video about conversations about driving.
Frank was diagnosed last year with Alzheimer's. His doctor has insisted that he stop driving immediately due to his diminished and deteriorating cognitive judgment. Frank's wife, Betty, agrees with the doctor. However, Betty has never driven and is an unlikely candidate for learning. She has relied on Frank for all of their transportation needs, but she knows she must confront him.
I think I'll head on over to Jim's before it gets too late.
Oh, honey, wait a moment, please. This is from Dr. Robinson. Do you remember from yesterday?
No, I do not.
Would you read it, please?
There's nothing wrong with my driving.
You almost hit a man yesterday. He was on his bicycle, don't you remember?
There's no such thing as a prescription to stop driving.
This is from Dr. Robinson, just to remind you, when we met with him yesterday. We met yesterday morning. Honey.
I know, Okay. I sometimes forget where you get your hair done. On Fridays, where you get it done on Fridays, but that has nothing to do with my driving.
You always told me to be honest with you. When this thing first started, you said no matter how difficult, I needed to be direct. You almost hit a man yesterday. He was riding on his bicycle. Do you know we could never live with ourselves if we hurt someone?
We?
This is us. We're a team. This is us, we. Frank, you've been driving for almost 60 years, and you're a great driver. But things change. We're older now.
You could drive us.
Not with my eyes. I couldn't get a license.
The cinnamon rolls. The coffee and the cinnamon rolls at the mall. Who's going to drive us there in the morning? That's our group.
Frank, I've been thinking about this. Ted and Joan always say they want to help.
He's a terrible driver.
Well, we could start a carpool and we buy the cinnamon rolls and the coffee. Huh? Just the coffee. Oh, what does it matter? What difference is it, Frank?
What about your hair? They're not going to take you to the salon, too.
It's so close. I could get a taxi. Remember when we first made the decision to downsize to this place? One of the reasons we moved here was because it was so close to everything. That was part of the plan. Honey, please.
What kind of a man am I if I can't even drive you to get your hair done or to the mall? That's not a life. That's nothing.
Frank,
It's nothing.
a real man understands change and tries to act in a responsible way. You're a real man, Frank. I don't need a chauffeur. I didn't marry a chauffeur. I don't need you to drive me, to drive us. Nothing matters, Frank. Except you. Nothing. You're all that matters to me. I love you, Frank.
Speaking to a spouse with Alzheimer's about stopping driving can be very challenging, especially if he or she has been the main driver in the family. Here are some ideas for how to frame the conversation. Reinforce medical diagnoses and directives. Frank trusts and respects his longtime doctor and may be more likely to accept his recommendation. Anticipating that Frank would not remember his doctor's instructions, Betty had the physician write on a prescription pad that Frank was to no longer drive. She shows him the prescription when he becomes defensive. Demonstrate understanding and empathy. Acknowledge the difficulty that relinquishing driving poses. Betty states that she knows Frank has been a good driver for more than 60 years, but she then explains that he no longer possesses the necessary judgment to drive safely. Stress the positive while offering alternatives. Driving is an empowering activity, especially for seniors. Finding an alternate driving source can help alleviate feelings of helplessness. Betty tells Frank that they can reach out to their friends to carpool to the mall each morning, and that she can take a taxi to her Friday hair appointments. Offer unconditional love and support. Agreeing to stop driving can be humiliating, leading to feelings of worthlessness. Reassure the person of your unconditional support and love, dismissing any significance attached to driving. Betty tells Frank that he was never her chauffeur and that she loves him. This may be the first of many conversations about driving. Due to the person's dementia, it is likely that you will have to address the driving issue several times. The person may forget that they agreed to stop driving, or they may not believe they cannot drive safely anymore, in spite of evidence to the contrary. It is important to remain patient, but firm about the decision.
In BC, physicians have a legal duty to report patients who have a medical condition that can make driving dangerous. This doesn't mean they always do. Family members and other concerned individuals can also report unsafe drivers to RoadSafe BC. Concerns must be expressed in writing. They must include your name, how you know the person with dementia, and give supporting reasons for the concerns. Information can be sent to Road Safety BC via email. However, they recommend that information is sent via fax to speed up the process. Road Safety BC does not identify who sent in the report, unless it was the physician. However, the driver in question can submit a Freedom of Information request to identify the person. The driver's medical examination report is the primary tool used to assess driving fitness. It's mailed to the driver and completed by the person's physician. An additional enhanced road safety assessment may be required to complete the assessment if Road Safety BC determines that more information or assessment is required to accurately identify and assess driver medical fitness. The Enhanced Road Assessment, ERA, is conducted by ICBC on behalf of Road Safety BC. The assessment is completed in a vehicle that the driver provides. It's designed to evaluate driving skills and behavior in real-world driving situations that require increased cognitive demand. If the person is found fit to drive, he or she will not receive a notice from Road Safety BC. The person may have their driving capability reassessed in intervals determined on a case-by-case basis. If you, as the caregiver, disagree with the final assessment by Road Safety BC, you can write to the Road Safety BC office to request the decision be reconsidered. Road safety contact information can be seen on the screen. You can email them at roadsafetybc@gov.bc.ca, and their toll-free phone number is 1-855-387-7747, and their fax is 250-952-6555. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the FirstLink Dementia Helpline in English, in Cantonese and Mandarin, or in Punjabi.